budget, you often hear a government claim that this budget is pro-poor, pro-rural India. But unfortunately, rural India remains in distress, deepening with the economic slowdown, and is also the key to recovery. Expert after expert is recommending ways to increase rural incomes as one of the solutions to boost the slump in demand. And while that may be a focus in the upcoming budget, chronic issues that bog down Indian agriculture like small farms, poor irrigation, and now natural calamities still don't have solutions. So what should Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman focus on in this year's budget for the rural and agricultural sector? To speak on this, I'm joined today by two of the foremost voices on the subject, Siraj Hussain, former Agricultural Secretary, and Dr. Narendar Pani, Professor, National Institute of Advanced Studies. Welcome to both of you and thank you for speaking with us. Mr. Hussain, let me begin with your opening thoughts on how crucial will Bharat focusing on increasing incomes be in this budget in the overall picture as well. If you want to improve the demand slump, you need to increase incomes, and rural incomes is the way to go.
I think agriculture and rural sector is very crucial for effecting the recovery in the Indian economy, which has been sinking for the last at least 1 year, even though the signs were there very much to see after demonetization, but then even financial experts did not want to see those signs. See, approximately half of the Indian population is still dependent on agriculture in one way or the other. Therefore, if the income earned by the rural India, by people dependent on agriculture, either directly or indirectly, unless their incomes go up, it will be very difficult to get a rebound of rural economy. And it is crucial not only for the agriculture sector itself, but also for the industrial sector, because it is the rural economy which provides market to a number of products made by the industrial economy.
Okay, now let's talk about what needs to be done. We know that there is a stated goal of doubling farmers' incomes by 2022. It is also pretty clear that far from doubling farmers' incomes, right now the need is to sustain farmers' incomes. Professor Pani, you want to bring in perspective on where you think the focus needs to be as far as the agri sector is concerned?
Yeah, I think you need to be clear about the two main challenges in agriculture, which are related to the fact that people are moving out of agriculture. As long as we see agriculture as static and as the people, the farmers there as a static group, we're missing this critical point. We must remember that even between 2001 and 2011, the number of cultivators declined by over 8 million. So you're talking about a large kind of a shift out of agriculture. Question is, how do you manage that? Given the uncertainties in job market, in the urban job market, there is a focus on trying to treat agriculture as a safety net. So people who have small farms, even when they come to urban areas, they prefer to leave their land fallow rather than selling it and making a complete shift into the urban economy. In that case, you have a challenge of substantial amount of fallow land across the country. Now you need a way of actually cultivating that. Whether it can be done through an agency which delivers the service of cultivation for a fee, or whether you work out any other arrangement, whether it's sharing or the risk is taken by those who have land, whatever the arrangement you make. When someone whose farm has become too small to be viable moves into the urban area, but he can give that land to a larger agency that can cultivate it. It gives both security for the urban transition as well as increases the yield in agriculture. Together with that, we must recognize that a major part of the uncertainty today is not just the yield, in fact, sometimes not mainly the yield, but the price. And the price uncertainty, there are mechanisms that can manage it. I mean, we have previously used procurement price, but that is something that is not viable because the government cannot guarantee to buy grain that cannot be sold. But if we were to create a forward market in which we fix a price that at least the farmer knows the price that he's going to get before he actually begins cultivating a crop, he can decide whether to cultivate that crop or not. For this system to work, you don't give necessarily a remunerative price. If it's remunerative, the farmer will decide and go into it. But you must fix a realistic price, a price that he can expect to get when the crop is harvested.
Yeah.
If we can do that, it's usually done globally through a forward market. If we can do that, then we really have a way of both stabilizing agriculture as well as ensuring that those who leave agriculture have something to fall back on.
Okay, so now I just want to focus on what's been done so far, because this is one area where, largely because of political compulsions, there is a lot of focus, there is a lot of talk, and there are tons of schemes. So, I'm going to start with Siraj Hussain and then come to Professor Pani. But Siraj Hussain, if you take a look at what is on the anvil right now, you have a PM Kisan scheme, so you already have a pipeline to transfer at least 6,000 rupees a year. You have a Kisan pension scheme. You have a crop insurance scheme. So you have all the schemes in place. You already have an FPO system that Professor Pani was talking about, where small farmers with small holdings can also participate. Is the problem now in implementation instead of more schemes?
Of course, the schemes of the agriculture sector are implemented largely by the state governments, and therefore the efficiency of these state governments determine the pace of implementation of various projects. So, for example, for irrigation projects, we have seen that despite the best intentions of the center, the progress of completion of projects and bringing additional area under irrigation, which is measured by irrigation potential utilized, the progress has not been up to the mark. So, what needs to happen is that the center has to talk more closely to the states. See, unfortunately, what has happened is that a lot of center's energy is currently dissipated on account of very controversial, emotional and communal issues. So, I mean, I have written about it. I only hope that the center will get back its focus, get back its bearing, and really talk to the state governments, build consensus on various issues relating to rural economy, and then take the sector forward.
Okay, that's an interesting point, Mr. Hussain, but that argument about a distracted center extends to all sectors right now, or the current economic slowdown. I want to just focus a little more closely on agriculture, because again, in the last few budgets, you've had huge portions of the speech and the budget document itself dedicated to improvement in the agri sector. You have committee after committee with a plethora of suggestions. But what has been the miss in actual implementation? Professor Pani, if you want to come in on this part, where have we been able to actually help? And if you look back at 2019, horrific year in terms of exposing how vulnerable our farmers are to the vagaries of climate change.
Yeah, I think the basic problem, when we see it as just a problem of implementation, we are, I think, underestimating the problem. Because I think a large number of the schemes that have been developed in a way that reduces the burden on the farmers at the end point. There's very little attention, or at least relatively less attention being paid to what are we doing to create a system that actually grows on its own. As a result of which, very often, you're not taking into account conditions that are there on the ground. If people are moving out of agriculture, what is the government's position on that? If there is such substantial price fluctuation, what is the government going to do about that? None of these schemes address those kinds of issues. They do address the distress the farmer feels. So, can you give out a dole, or can we provide MGN, REGS, or anything like that. But the fact of the matter is there are fundamental trends taking place in agriculture. Is the government going to try to counter those trends, or is it going to try to change its policies and ensure those trends? It's easier for the agricultural population to adapt to these changes. This is particularly true of climate change. We need to come to terms with this, whether the recurring floods in states like Kerala or several other parts of the country. We need to come to terms. There are people who are adjusting to it, but we don't see that aspect coming in directly. The analytical aspect, the conceptual aspect, we are not seeing that in the policy. We are seeing it just as a dole in the end.
I think that's a very important point, and we should talk a little bit more about it. Siraj Hussain, climate change, these periods of drought, then huge amounts of floods, rains at the wrong time, which has destroyed crop upon crop. Do you think that there now needs to be a path, a safety net for farmers?
Of course, you see, but more than the safety net, climate change has to be tackled by science. And I mean that the Indian Council of Agriculture Research has to be adequately funded to develop varieties which will address the challenge of climate change. So, for example, for rice, we do have varieties developed, Saibhagi Dhan, for example, which are climate resistant. So, similar investment in research has to be provided by the center and also through the state agriculture universities by the state governments, so that research can give you varieties which will be climate resistant. We have seen what research can achieve. In case of paddy, for example, India is now a major exporter of 1121 variety of rice, or 1509 variety of Pusa Basmati, or in case of sugarcane, CA0237. So all these changes have come because of science. On GM itself, the center has not been able to make up its mind. So it is neither here nor there. Now, climate change or the impact of climate cannot be mitigated by just talking about it. Serious action has to be taken, not only for developing varieties, but also in other fields, climate resilient agriculture, water conservation, etc., etc. There are a whole lot of things which are required to be done. See, one thing we should remember for agriculture is that there are a number of steps which are required, which will hopefully address the problem over 5 to 10 years. And there are certain things, unfortunately, governments work in for a very short term. And therefore, from one election to another election, they want results. And that is how PM Kisan came. So since there is no election right now, I hope that the union budget will come up with long-term policies.
Well, long-term policies, but also with quick results. Professor Pani, I understand Siraj Hussain's point that, we shouldn't work from election to election. Can we afford now not to step in? I want to get a sense from you on how dire the situation is, at least in terms of income support, at least in terms of alternate professions for those who are being forced to leave agriculture because it's no longer lucrative. Do we need stronger, clearer direction with more immediacy?
Most certainly. I think we need to come to terms with what is happening on the ground and then decide what is our best approach to it. If people are leaving in large numbers, are you going to manage that? Are you going to enable that movement into urban centers? Are you going to turn their land into a kind of a safety net? Are we going to, these are decisions that have to be taken, and then you have to look at the science of that process, or the social science of that process, if you like, to look at actually the way you're going to manage that kind of massive transition. You're talking about millions, actually hundreds of millions of people here, and your cities are not going to be able to absorb that. So you need to find out alternative ways of doing it. And I don't think any of these questions are being addressed with the seriousness they deserve. And I think that really is at the heart of the problem. Once there is that kind of a shift where we don't keep saying that we know all the answers, we are not implementing it, but we recognize that we don't know half the answers. I think then we'll come up with ways of looking at agriculture, ways of looking at the rural economy, and that will be debatable. There will be disagreements about it, but at least we need to start by saying, okay, we don't know what's happening, we don't know enough about what's happening. Let us see what we can do, what we can learn, and take it forward. Whether it is in the crops, the climate-resistant crops that Mr. Siraj Hussain was talking about, or in anything else. But I think there is a need for us to get a little humble and recognize that we don't know everything.
Absolutely. Wise words there. Let's begin by understanding that we don't know anything we don't know everything, and we need solutions, especially considering the fact the vast number of Indians employed in agriculture. Can we really afford that many people without enough sustainable incomes? Maybe that's where we need to start looking at our problems equally in the larger picture of the economic slowdown. I want to thank both Siraj Hussain and Narendar Pani for joining us on the budget debate this evening. Well, we're taking a very short break on India development debate, but coming up, a bizarre story, and no one can make this up. The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia has been accused of infecting Jeff Bezos' phone with a virus through a WhatsApp message that has gone into his private data. Yes, it's strange but true. We are going to find out today if this technology actually exists and how vulnerable you are. Coming back with that special discussion after the break. Don't go away.